The following is a conversation with Rick Sponhaltz. Rick is a real estate agent and auctioneer for Gary W. Kane Realtors and Auctioneers. He has been a great friend and resource as I attempt to progress as an auctioneer and as a person. Please enjoy my conversation with Rick Sponholtz. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. All right. Well, Rick, first of all, thanks for taking time out of your Sunday morning to talk to me today. And thanks for getting here an hour earlier than we thought we needed to, because whenever I planned this...
Change in time.
Yeah, I didn't think of the time change, so we said we meet at 10. Turns out we had to meet at 9. So thanks for getting here, and thanks for giving me your time. So let's just jump right into it. How did you get into auctioneering?
I started working for Gary Kane in the real estate business in 1978, and Joanne McLean was the secretary here. We only had this office in East Springfield at the time, and she always said the day my license came in is the day that real estate went to hell in a handbasket as far as the business. Mines started laying off, the mills started laying off, inflation started going rampant, people weren't working. Actually, interest rates went to 16%. I sold one house at 16% interest.
Wow.
And so it was not only tough to get a loan, there were banks that weren't even making mortgage loans back then. So Gary also had the auction business and needed runners to help set up auctions and work the day of the auction, and I needed money, so I started being a runner. And Gary was an auctioneer. Wendell, which was Gary's dad, was an auctioneer, and if I refer to Wendell anymore, it'd be Papo Butch. That's what we always called him. And he also had a young auctioneer by the name of Ross Rinkus, who lived over in Harrisville and married one of the McConnell girls from the meat market. And Gary had booked a big auction over at New Somerset, and it was actually full of antiques, old equipment, machinery, a lot of engines and stuff, and found out that Ross had taken another job down in Virginia, and it was just going to be he and Gary. So at the time, Gary was actually on the state board as far as the Auctioneers Commission, and actually gave the test to people, to become an auctioneer. And after we had an auction in Wintersville on a Saturday, had the next big auction coming up the next Saturday, and he said, keep your Wednesday open. And I said, well, what do we have on Wednesday? He says, you're going to Columbus to get an auctioneer's license. So that's how I became an auctioneer for 4 or 5 days. At that time, I pretty much went with Gary every day, and for 4 or 5 days, we'd go down the road, and he said, sell that baler sitting out in the field, sell this pickup, sell that car. And so that's how I became an auctioneer. I took the test, the apprentice test, on a Wednesday, and unbeknownst, with, I guess, pulling a few strings because of your position, why the results were back in Wednesday night, and I had an apprentice license by Saturday. So that's how I started.
So were you selling real estate before you
Yes.
got your auctioneer's license? How long did you do that before you got your real estate license?
I'm going to say it's probably somewhere around 2-3 years.
And were you into anything before that? Like, I only know you as Rick Sponholtz, the auctioneer and the real estate agent.
I actually worked for Everly Septic Tank Company when I started working here. Dick was nice enough. I had worked at a printing shop for a gentleman by the name of Ray Adams that lived out in this area at Braceland Brothers in Steubenville, and got promoted. I was in charge of the bindery, and being the boss of about 15 to 18 women wasn't the best job in the world. It was a tough job. And so I actually resigned from that job and spent a couple months in Morgantown, and then came back. And at the time, they were building bleachers on the hillside at Springfield. That's how many years ago that's been. And so myself and a couple laid off coal miners actually went down and got everything ready to pour for the next day. And it was a community project, and they put the bleachers on the hillside in a matter of a couple weeks, which was kind of phenomenal. Dick Everly at Ed Everly Septic Tank was in charge of everything, and when we got done with the bleachers, he offered me a job, and I was broke, so I worked for him, but just when I didn't see a big future in making septic tanks.
So it's funny that you mentioned just having a big future in anything. Like I talked about this on the last conversation I had with Brad and with Harry, and it's kind of one of the reasons I think why I'm trying to have these conversations, because you and I and everyone else knows that online auctions it's here, right? I mean, it's here. Everybody does online auctions except us, and we're working on it. We'll be doing it eventually. But do you, and I think this is the case, do you think that there will always be a future for live auctions?
Yes, I think there's always going to be a place, and a couple reasons. I think there's always going to be a place for live auctions, plus I don't think that the present auctioneers are going to completely snuff them out. You know, I think a lot of people enjoy the live auctions. A lot of buyers enjoy the live auctions, and I think they're, you know, the online auctions, people don't get as carried away. I mean, face it, you know, we've been doing auctions for years, and a lot of times the excitement of the auction, somebody will say, you know, I was going to pay $150 for that, and I ended up paying $210. Well, they get caught up in the auction. You don't really have that influence with an online auction.
I
you're
agree.
Looking at a computer screen. There's an aura to an auction. It's a happening. I know that, especially at real estate auctions, years ago we used to have real estate auctions, and we might have 2, 3, 4 auctions every week. And Brad and I would always notice there were some people that would come to every auction, never bid. You know, they'd be critical of things and, you know, tell you what was wrong with the house. But we used to always say, well, you know, we need to put our money together and buy that person a television so they have something to do, because that's what they were using us for, was to come and for entertainment. And I think there is an entertainment aspect to the auction business that helps make it successful.
I absolutely agree. Auctions, man, I mean, let's face it, they can be fun. I think it's one of the reasons why I want to pursue it so much more. It's one of the reasons why I think anyone gets into being an auctioneer, because you get a taste of it and it's fun. And the same thing with people going to an auction. How many times we have people show up at an auction, it's their first auction they've ever been to, and then by the end of the day, they're loading up their Toyota Camry with, you know, everything that they bought that day, and they're like, man, this is my first auction. I've never had so much fun.
They got to call the brother or sister-in-law to bring another vehicle to get all the stuff home.
And then they're back at the next one.
And then they're hooked.
And you talked about it. I think that as far, because we say all the time, our goal as auctioneers is to make the most money possible for the seller, the person that we are working for. That's who we work for. Always, that's who we work for.
But to be fair to everybody else.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, and be fair to everybody else.
It's got to be a level playing field for everybody that's there that's a buyer, you know, for it to work correctly.
And I think that there are just some things that no matter what, you're going to get more money for it if you have a live option. Or we talked about a person bidding at home on a computer. Now me personally, I've never bought anything online at an online auction. I never have. But I would think that it would be way easier to stop bidding if you're not there, because then you start thinking about, well, I don't really feel like going out there to get it.
All you have to do is flip a button.
Right. Maybe I haven't. You know. Maybe you haven't even seen it. You know what I mean? That's another thing. Now I know for an online auction they'll have preview days where you can come check it out and stuff. But if you're there that day and you can put your hands on it, and you decided to dedicate your Saturday to this thing, whatever it is, well, I'm not going to lose it for $25, right? And you'll keep going, and we've all experienced it. You start bidding on something,
it's hard to quit.
It's hard to quit, man. You feel it right here, and you're like,
But
it becomes a competition. Like you don't want to lose, right?
You hit the word exactly. It's a competitiveness that you don't want to be a loser.
Right, right, and yeah, like, well, maybe I want to quit bidding, but I don't want that guy to have it. If he's going to bid against me, well then I'll show him. So all these years auctioneering, do you have any stories that maybe stand out? I'm sure you have 100, but anything that maybe stands out?
There's plus a lot of stories that are probably not appropriate to tell you, but we had Norm Greger used to work for us as a runner. We always called him Uncle Norm because he would have been Tammy Kane's uncle. Her father, Gene, they were brothers. And we were selling some good antiques, and Norm was they just sold a corner cupboard. It was actually disintegrating. It was pretty well eaten up with termites. And he had to move it out of the way, move it up to where the buyer of the property could get it. And he was trying to move it, and a gentleman came over and he said, would you like me to help you? And Norm said, yes, please. And so they were carrying this up over to put it in the back where the buyer could get it. And Norm made the comment to him. He said, do you believe this stupid, I think he called him an SOB, that bought this, paid $450 for it? And the guy said, yeah, I believe it. He says, I'm the guy that bought it. So Norm was pretty embarrassed about it. And there's just story after story that, you could tell a lot of hilarious things about the auction business. And, we've had a lot of good people down the pike that worked for us for runners and bid takers, and people that were laid off and in good positions, and filled in the time that Gary was nice enough to hire them to help them out financially. And we've had a lot of good people.
Well, that's what I'm doing here, right? I think that's how everybody ends up here. You could use the money, and Canes could use the help, and we're always looking for somebody to help out, lifting furniture, or just grabbing bids, just being a person there who can. We always need help, right? And I'm absolutely grateful for Gary doing that for me. At the time, I was only just a 16-year-old kid that was able to lift couches for him.
Well, when you were going to college, it filled in and gave you a part-time income for a while.
Yeah, it definitely helped out a lot, man. Do you have a favorite item that you like to sell?
Real estate.
Real estate? Why?
Money.
Yeah.
You can make some money. It's what's nice about real estate is if there's a house for sale, you might show that house 5-10 times, and nobody likes it, nobody makes an offer on it. Where if you put that house up for auction and you show it a couple times, you're more than likely going to get somebody interested in it. They're going to come back and bid on it, and a potential buyer. And face it, you can go out and sell. It can be 95 degrees and not a breeze blowing, and terrible hot day, and have dirty merchandise coming out of a house, and you can be pounding your head for dollar bids, and at the end of the day, after you've been there all day long and drank 27 bottles of water, why maybe you'll put $30-40 in your pocket, where you can sell a piece of real estate and at closing within 30 days, put a substantial amount of money into your pocket. And we've had some darn good auctions. It's probably the best auction we had. Brad and I listed an auction one day, and in one afternoon's time, we sold over $1 million. It was over $1.1 million worth of real estate in one day.
Where was that?
Steubenville, for a coal company. And, we sold, it was, at that time was the old Fan restaurant, right where you turn in to go to the dry cleaners, and sold the old YMCA building downtown, a couple pieces of tracts of ground out by the drive-in in Wintersville, huge house on Teresa Drive, and a couple other buildings. But It was to liquidate stuff, and very, very successful auction. Everything sold that day. We did have a title problem on the old YMCA building that I think we had to wait 6 to 8 months to close it, but we finally got it closed.
Well, no auction's complete without a title issue, right?
Well, without problems.
Right.
If there weren't any problems, they wouldn't need you to step in for them. Everybody could sell their own real estate or anything else.
And that's the thing. And I mean, I'm very, very new to the real estate game. I don't mess with it a whole lot. I mean, the only reason why I got my real estate license in the first place is so I can auction houses. It's the only item you need a supplemental licensure to sell, right? We can sell guns, cars, anything with just an auctioneer's license, but you need to have that real estate license to sell real estate. But it is like you learn quickly, whether you're a seller or whether you're just a real estate agent, you learn quickly that like it's tough to sell a house. I mean, there's a lot of ins and outs that goes into a lot of things that you need to know. And I actually think that's like if I ever have a question, especially about real estate, you're usually the guy that I'm going to be coming to because I think you're very knowledgeable with the law. First of all, what legally can you do? And we got to make sure that we're...
Well, I've been doing it since 1978, so
yeah, I
should have learned something in those years.
Right. So since we're talking about real estate auctions, let's face it, we don't have very many real estate auctions, at least not the way that we used to, I don't think.
Well, the market's been kind of designates that a little bit too, because the market's been so hot lately. I'll tell you, now is the time you should be selling things at real estate because who knows what things have been worth the last couple years. I mean, you think, oh, this property is worth X amount of dollars, and you put it on the market and maybe add a few $1,000s to it, and it sells for several $1,000s more than what you listed it for.
Yeah.
So those are the type of things you don't want to put a piece of real estate on the market that's been sitting there and stagnant for a long time. You want to put something that's going to cause an excitement and get more than one person interested in it. Those are the successful auctions that you do have.
And create that competition.
Yes.
Create that competition.
Yes.
You'll go to list a property and you'll talk to this guy, that lady, and they'll be like, oh, I'd go that much. Or like, ooh, I'm interested in that. How much you listen that for? It's like, well, maybe we ought to have an auction because there's all these people around that are asking about it, and that's exactly what you have an auction for.
Yep. Yeah, when you got more than one person that's expressed interest in it, plus that puts the seller off the hook. The seller's sitting there and they might know 5 people that are interested in that house, 5 people that they've grown up with or have lived in the same community with. They turn that house over to us. We sell it at auction. That gives them the out. They can honestly tell those people, hey, I gave that to Clint Chevalier of Gary Kane Realtors and Auctioneers. They're the ones that are selling it. I'm not selling it. So there's an excuse there and a little leeway that takes the pressure off of the seller too.
And we talked about this a minute ago. It makes it fair. It makes it a level playing field. How many times have any of us sold a house and then or you hear a story about someone who was trying to buy a house and they're like, man, I'm telling you, I put my bid in before they did, but this house still sold to someone else for less than what I put it. Like whoever we say sold to, right there, everybody knows how much you just paid. Like and everybody else had their own chance at it.
You announce the terms and conditions, and that, like I said before, that puts everybody on that level playing field going into the transaction. You'll list something at auction, and you have all kind of people that try to buy it before. There's usually one reason that somebody wants to buy something real bad before an auction, and that's they can't live with the terms and conditions. There's something there that's a little glitch. And so they want to try to get it under contract without the auction with their terms and conditions, because that's the other thing that when you sell at auction, the real estate company or the auction company plus the sellers, they're setting the terms and conditions. If you're the seller and you want this, this, and this done, we can sell it that way, and those have become conditions of the contract. Where if you put a for sale sign on it and say we want X amount of dollars as the asking price, you're going to get buyers that are going to give their best terms and conditions to you, and then you got to sort everything out. So there's a lot of pluses to selling at auction. It's the cleanest transactions you can have, I believe, my years of selling real estate.
Do you think that there's, and I mean, this is the game that every auctioneer is playing. Do you think that there is any one or several ways that we could improve our real estate auctions, get more houses listed as an auction instead of just a straight up listing? Not that there's anything wrong with listing a house outright, but let's face it, I mean, we're in the auctioneer game, and we look at it through our lens of an auctioneer, and we think that could be better. Do you think there's anything we can do?
I think that there's circumstances where maybe you do not want to have a real estate auction.
I agree.
And I think you have to look at every transaction or every possible transaction differently, because some houses are going to make a terrific property to sell at auction. Some properties are going to be not so successful. I know a lot of times, and it's happened in the past, when I first started with working for Gary back in the 70s, in the early 80s, we had a ton of properties coming up for auction when the market started to get bad. And we fell flat on our face for 2 weeks one time. I bet you we had 7 or 8 nice brick ranches in the Wintersville, Steubenville, good areas to sell, and we go to the auction, there wouldn't be one person there. Well, that's, first of all, auctions were telling you the immediate market. That's when the bottom fell out of the real estate market. That's why there was nobody there. That's when interest rates went to 16, 18%. People didn't have jobs. People had been buying houses through government loans, FHA, VA, where back then you were buying a brick ranch in a nice subdivision of Wintersville, say, and you were paying $45,000 to $55,000 to $60,000. They bought those houses with no money down. 2 years prior to that, say, when they had to sell because they lost their job, that house that they paid $55,000 for was only worth $45,000 or $40,000. It was a terrible, terrible time to be in the business, and we got pretty good there for a couple weeks. We even chuckled about it among ourselves. 2 of us would take off when nobody showed up. The auction was at, say, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and nobody would be there at 5:05. 2 of us would take off and pick up all the signs pointing to the auction, get in the car with their tails between the legs and go home, Because we felt embarrassed at the time, but little did we know that that's what the market was for several years. And so there's not every house, not every property is an auction property. It depends on all the circumstances.
Right. How long do you think is a good time to advertise a piece of real estate for auction? What I mean is, how long do you think you should, how much time should go from the day that you list it and make it public to everybody to the day that you have the auction? Because there's got to be too long and too short.
Kind of depends on the property and the type that you're selling. I think a very minimum should be a minimum of 30 days, and that's when you got the advertising ready to go. If I go out and list the property today, I'm probably not going to get all the ads written and get everything ready for 2 or 3 days at least. If I got 2 or 3 days, I can work on it. But I'd say, a minimum of 30 days. You want to get people into the property to take a look at it, do their due diligence on the property, because that buyer, the more comfortable you can make that buyer feel about buying that property, the more he's going to spend. And that's one thing you're there for, is to get the best price that you can get, market value price for the seller. And so you want to do everything you can to put that buyer's eyes or mind at ease so that he feels comfortable, with his purchase.
I think a lot of times an issue, and maybe it's just my opinion, a lot of times an issue that we run into is that you got to give people time to get their finances in order. Because I mean, unless you're a cash buyer, obviously, but most people are getting a loan of some kind to buy a house, and this is a problem we run into just whenever we're just showing houses or listing houses outright. People a lot of times they don't quite understand that you need to be pre-approved really before you're even looking. I mean, you can look at a house at any time, but if a house is listed on the market, especially if it's something that's probably going to sell pretty quick, and you're looking at it today and you're not pre-approved, man, you're probably not going to get that house. It's probably going to sell before you're even ready. Right. So that's why I think a lot of times, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think a lot of times we don't give our customers enough time to get their finances in order for an auction, a real estate auction.
There's depends on how they're going to finance it. There's financing that you're not really capable of buying at auction. If you're going with a government loan, an FHA or a V loan, technically those are very tough because the lender's going to want you to sign an affidavit stating that if that house does not appraise for the purchase price, they don't have to buy it. Well, that breaks the terms of the auction agreement, the real estate auctions that we have on most properties where, if you're the high bidder, you buy it. If you don't buy it, you're going to lose your deposit and, be subject to a lawsuit. And so it's can get touchy there at times. That's why I say there are some houses, market, when the market wasn't real great 10 years ago, there were a lot of houses that were an FHA house. Probably the buyer of that house was going to go FHA financing. And that shouldn't be an auction house. If you think that house should sell to somebody that's going to get FHA financing, don't sell it at auction. Put it on the market, let them write their offer subject to their financing, and go from there.
What is the most unusual thing that you can think of that you've ever sold at an auction?
Wow. That's a tough one.
I know it is. I know it's a tough one for me to answer too.
I'll tell you, one of the most unusual things we've ever seen was getting a house ready to sell at auction, and this has been 40 years ago, in a little community up in a closet. We had a guy pulled some stuff out, and here there was an embryo in a jar, and found out later through the attorney that was in charge of the estate that the lady that we were selling for was a little old maid that had never been married, but she had, unbeknownst to most people, had been pregnant when she was, around 20 years old, and they feel that was the baby that she had lost, and it was a terrible feeling. We had to go through the county and do all this stuff to get rid of it. So.
Whoa. So like, you mean like there was like a fetus in a jar, like a little baby in a jar?
Yeah.
Wow, that's wild, man. That's wild. I don't think you're gonna be able to top that one. So don't try and think of anything else, dude. That is crazy.
I mean, we didn't sell it.
Oh no! Yeah, I'm not saying you sold it, but that's wild, man. That's wild. I've heard stories like that before. I heard a story on the radio one time where somebody was going in to clean out a house and they found like a body in a freezer or something like that. I didn't know we'd ever found anything like that. That's wild.
Gary had one of his friends. This is before my time with Gary at an auction, and he was selling stuff, and all of a sudden everybody started gasping and making noises and stuff, and he turned around, and one of the guys that he had, one of his buddies that was working, setting up the auction for him, they were bringing stuff out of the house to sell, and he had found a uniform and put it on, and here was a KKK uniform with a hood and everything. So I guess that was kind of a stopper for the auction.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, man. I really, I think that was, I think that was some good information you gave me, man. It really, like I said, you're the guy that I like to come to, especially when I have real estate questions. I like to ask you
Well,
real
thank
estate
you.
questions. No, I mean, or just to make sure that we're doing something legal. I mean, because you got to make sure you're selling things legally, man.
It's a market, the market's always changing. The business is always changing. Since I entered this business, of course, technology's hit and the internet's hit. Mm-hmm. And, when I first started in the real estate business, we didn't even have cell phones. Mm-hmm. Well, now you're walking around with that high-powered computer in your hand all the time.
Yeah.
And so there's been an awful lot of changes, and I think you're going to see changes in the future. I do agree with you, and I think that we do have to take the step forward. It's just logistically and getting the right people in place to run online auctions. I know that there's some pretty well-established auction companies, and maybe not in the Steubenville area, but in surrounding areas where auctioneers aren't doing personal properties anymore. They're still doing the real estate auctions, but they've tied in with other auction companies. If there's a personal property auction, hey, give it to these guys. Mm-hmm. Because they're set up better to do that. And so maybe that's an option in the future also.
Well, I think one of the biggest things that's changed with the new technologies and everything is advertising. Think of what our advertising bills used to be, and now, I mean, with Facebook and any type of social media platform, like, advertising is pretty much free now. Yeah. And in fact, I've only sold one piece of property at auction, and it was that double wide down in Irondale not too long ago. And talking to the owners, we discussed it, and we were just like, no, we're not going to advertise that in the paper. They decided not to go newspaper, not to put it in the farm and dairy. And I made sure that I didn't persuade them either one way or the other, but I'm like, they felt that the internet was the place to advertise, and their advertising bill was like $40 or something. You know what I mean? Because they still did the mail out flyers, but they didn't do the paper.
I think papers are. It's not going to be very long, and we're not going to have papers, and of course do away with that advertising. There's still one group of people, I think, when you get people that are elderly like me anymore, I hate to say that I still enjoy looking at the paper, and I think a lot of people my age and maybe a little bit older are, but they're really not buyers in the markets anymore.
That's a good point, yeah.
It's you just have to stay up with changes and try to keep improving the service. I still think it's one-on-one with sellers and buyers. The people that are successful are the people that offer good service, that you're able to get hold of. I don't want to call somebody and then have them get back in touch with me 5, 6, 8 hours later. You want immediate satisfaction, or if not immediate, within a short period of time. You watch old movies, and I was watching a movie about 2 years ago, and I think it was a Rock Hudson movie, to tell you the truth, and he was going to work in a high-rise skyscraper in New York City, and there were thousands of people walking into this building. Everybody had a cigarette. They had a paper underneath of their arm.
Probably hats too, right?
They had hats. But I looked at the paper. Everybody had a paper underneath their arm and going to work. And then I think later that night I was watching another movie, and it was showing people. There wasn't one person with a paper. Everybody's walking, looking at their cell phone. So that's kind of those two movies in that one afternoon that I watched kind of told the whole story of our business too.
Yeah.
It's you can't sit in the office listening to phones ring for real estate. What you got to do is people are going to contact you on the internet. They're going to contact you through your phone. So you have to be viable. You have to advertising on through the internet, and I'm not going to make any names, but Facebook's one of them. It is a very viable way of entertainment, but there's that to me is the main thing is how you do business anymore.
Hopefully, the way that I would like to get to it, because again, man, we will have an online we already do have an online presence, at least we have our website, canerealty.online. We're on Facebook. We advertise our auctions on Facebook. We advertise our real estate listings on Facebook.
We're at auction.com.
Oh yeah, auction zip and go to auction, all that stuff. We're online, but we don't have an online bidding platform. And the way that most of the bidding platforms are right now is essentially it's like an eBay type platform where it's click to bid, right? And that'll be great when we get that going, but to be honest with you, I'm not all that excited about it. The live auction and the bid calling is what's fun to me, and it's what I want to keep doing. So hopefully, I see no reason. We got to make sure that again everything's legal and we're doing it the right way, and that it is the best way to do it. But I see no reason why within the next 10 years or less that we're not doing live bid calling for a piece of real estate or a piece of personal property directly through Facebook. Just a live video. Right through
it might
Facebook.
Not be Facebook, but it'd
something
be
like
on,
something like it. I'll just use it as an example, but
sure.
And I don't know how we would have to do it, but we'll have to do it some way to where people can still get registered, and we'll probably have to take your credit card number. It's just so.
Oh yeah.
We got to hold you to it. You can't just sign in and start bidding because you think it's funny, but that's what I would like to be able to do.
Yeah, everything's verified,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that you're correct. As far as Gary W. Kane Realtors and Auctioneers, or Realty and Auctioneers, as far as them having an online presence, the biggest thing there is the company, getting somebody that's going to handle that and somebody that's going to be in charge.
Right.
That's,
right. And maybe this will be the spring. We always say, well, we'll get to that in the spring, right? So hopefully we're taking more steps towards that. We do take slow steps towards it every month, every year. We're trying to get that online thing going, but we're all busy people, man. All of us are.
It's tough to, and there's some knowledge that you're going to have to obtain to be able to run it.
And that's the thing, and that's also the thing. There's almost no real hurry because you kind of want to let some other people maybe jump in and make some mistakes before you do, or just like right now, who do we really have to ask for help with it? Meaning who can we call up and say hey, when you do an online auction, how do you do this? I know Kiko's is doing online auctions now, so maybe if we ever had a question, we could call them, but
But they're your competitor, and
right?
They're not going to really set you up and put you in business.
Exactly.
I'm sure that a lot of people will help you, but it's a lot of catch-22 things with it, and we'll figure it out. And
well, I'll tell you where the advice is going to come from, and I'm already learning this because I have friends that are into this stuff. The advice is going to come from bidders, buyers. What do they like? What do they don't like? Because I have friends that love to go to live auctions and do online bidding, and they'll tell you I don't use this company, or I don't like to bid through them because they have this or whatever.
Well, I've got a brother who's bought a lot of stuff through online auctions,
Rex?
and still are. I mean, he's tied in with that tea room in Carrollton that his fiance has, and the Grand Tea Room at the Square in Carrollton, and it's fabulous when you walk in there, the antiques and stuff. Well, the majority of those were bought, carted in there. I mean, they've been all over 4 states buying stuff for 3 years to furnish the place, and he's bought a lot of stuff at auctions. But it's coming, and we have to give the people what they want to stay in business, and that's one of the reasons it's coming. And I think that Brad and Taylor and Kane that own the business now, I think that they're going to do what's best for the customers and clients, for Gary Kane Realtors and Auctioneers, and before this is over, I do want to say one thing. Kind of want to thank Gary Kane for everything that he's done for me in my career.
And I mean, I've said it before too. Like I owe Gary Kane a lot, man. A lot of people owe Gary Kane a lot. He was a great man, and I'm fortunate for all the opportunities he's given me. That's for sure.
And I appreciate you asking me to do this. It's a lot of fun.
No, man, you were definitely next on the list. You know what I mean? Okay. I had to make sure I got Rick in here to talk auctions with you. And before we get out of here, man, I didn't want to start off with this because I didn't want to get too sidetracked. But congratulations on your weight loss. Seriously, Congratulations on your weight loss. Congratulations on just making the decision to improve yourself. And
I'm about halfway there, so I just hit the 100 pounds, even though that I haven't taken that 100-pound off because I put a couple pounds on the last couple of days. But
that's the game.
Going to 190 from 388's where I actually started, but 354 on this journey, and should have done it years ago.
Well, that's incredibly impressive, man. The fact, like losing any amount of weight, or again, just making the decision to try and improve yourself is absolutely impressive. And I do truly enjoy opening up Facebook and seeing your posts about it. Seriously, it's one of the only things I look forward to when I open up Facebook, because usually it's full of negativity. But that's an incredibly positive thing, and I'm glad you're doing that.
Well, as Gary's dad, Papo Butch, used to say, if I knew I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself. So,
well, I think that's a good quote to end
thank
on.
you,
Rick. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
We'll probably do this again, man. I don't plan on stopping. And
I appreciate your little videos. I enjoy watching them, and I figured you'd be getting Taylor in one of these chairs before too long.
Taylor, you're probably next, bud.
I appreciate it.
I do too, man. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hopefully you enjoyed this conversation with Rick Sponhaltz. I always enjoy talking to Rick, and I don't think I've ever met anyone who doesn't enjoy talking to Rick. Now, I'm going to go against my better judgment and discuss the fact that I lost video at the end of this conversation. It is not the first time this has happened, and the last time it happened was for a different reason than this time, and I'm trying to take the necessary steps in order to make sure that this never happens again. I feel terrible about the fact that I lost the video at the end, but thankfully I was able to capture all of the audio. And again, if you made it this far, then maybe you wanted an explanation for that. And if you did make it this far, I appreciate the fact that you listened in the first place. So hopefully it does not happen again, and I will see everyone next time. Thank you so much for listening.